Welcome to Intune Training, the place to learn how to use Microsoft Intune, the Steve and Adam Show, with Ben. So I'm Steve, and we've got Ben subbing in today because of busy schedules and everything associated. We haven't been able to get Adam in. So hi, Ben.
Hey Steve, how are you?
I'm pretty good. Yourself?
I'm getting by, dude.
Awesome.
I'm getting by.
Awesome. So what are we going to talk about today, Ben?
So today I wanted to, every time I come on board, it's getting into the reads with this sort of stuff because it's obviously what I love doing. But we were having a discussion a couple of days ago around how can we store more advanced information, or as you like to call it, advanced inventory of data, which I really like that concept. And this was actually on Twitter where someone was asking the best way to actually store data from either logs from a script that ran, or sort of more advanced information on a local machine that isn't readily available in Intune right now. And I suggested that the best way to do this was to actually throw the data into an Azure Table. So I really just wanted to spend a little bit of time showing you how easy that is, using nothing but storage accounts in Azure and Power Automate flows. I believe that's the correct terminology. I'm not 100% sure anymore. They keep changing the naming. So
yes, it is this week.
Power Automate flows. Yes, that's correct.
Awesome. And before we get started, I just want to understand why we're doing it this way rather than doing a custom schema into the Graph API, where we could have it attached with the object.
Basically, this is, for lack of a better term, the quick and dirty way of doing it. If, for example, the perfect use case of this was I deployed a SharePoint template synchronize to a client, very much like the last time we caught up.
Yep.
And I just needed to know that it worked. So the quickest way that I did that was that in the deployment script that I pushed out, I grabbed some sort of telemetry data, for lack of a better term, just around the device that it was deployed to, who was using the machine, whether it was successful on a bunch of different vectors. And then I deployed that, or I pushed that up to a table store, and then I could just sit there. I created a Power BI dashboard, and I just watched it fill up and just made sure that there weren't any major issues. So this wasn't data that I wanted to keep forever. It was just
non-volatile data.
Exactly. It was just for the time. I just needed to know that it was working without watching it, or without reaching out to the client, because we didn't want to interrupt them. And it worked out really well, and it was no longer than 5 to 10 minutes to set everything up, which was the benefit here.
Definitely. And the other part that I'll put in there, just for the viewers at home, is look, you can put custom extensions into the Graph API, but they don't appear in the UI because you've defined it yourself.
Exactly.
There's a couple of other things around it that it's advanced, complex work. It can be done, but if you don't need to, don't do it.
Yeah, I tend to agree. All right, so should we just get started?
Yes, please.
All right, awesome. So obviously the first thing that we need to do is in your Azure tenant, you need to go ahead and create a storage account. I don't feel at this point that anyone needs to know how to do that, but you just go into storage accounts and you hit create. I've gone ahead and I've created one already. Absolute stock standard, no special things here. I've used all the basics. I've just given it a name, and it is currently completely empty with nothing in there.
Yep.
So we've gone in to our storage account that is Intune Training Table, and we're just going to go to Tables, or over here. Actually, no, that's Education. So we'll go over to Tables Service.
Yes.
Yes, don't randomly click on things. It's a bad idea. All right, and we're just going to create a table in this storage account, and we'll give it a name of Intune Training App Data. So just for everyone playing at home, what we're going to do is we'll sort of jumping back and forth around what we're actually going to store. And I think the easiest way for me to get this across is just get something that most people have difficulty finding information out about, which is applications that are installed on a local machine.
Yep.
So obviously we can just grab that information by hitting the WMI database object class on the local machine, but we just want to be able to store that information centrally. So it's the easiest way, but I'll explain later that it's not limited to just that sort of stuff. It's anything that you can create can work in this scenario. All right, so I'm just going to call this table that, and we'll just wait for it to build up.
Cool,
and that's
created.
there. Cool. All right. So now we're going to switch over to our Power Automate instance. So I've just logged in here with my Ben at Intune.training. Now there are licensing requirements involved in this. Steve can attest to this. Useless its licenses, but to use the full features of Power Automate, there are some licensing restrictions around what you actually need to get to some of the more advanced things, and you'll see some of those in this now.
Yeah.
We can maybe put some links about exactly what needs. Yeah,
It'll
down below.
Excellent. And look, from a licensing, while Ben goes through and creates this, at a high level, from a licensing point of view, to use the premium connectors, you need to have that E5 license now. While it was in preview, they were fully available, but it's now moving out of preview into production, and there is a requirement there to have the E5, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to go in and I'm going to create a brand new flow, because obviously you can see here that I don't have any. This is brand new. So we're just going to go ahead and go automated from blank. There's obviously quite a lot of templates here, but what we're doing is non-templated. It can be the point where, if anyone sees value in this, we can actually turn what we're showing you now into a template for everyone to use. But because there's so much custom data in it, I don't see a strong sort of value.
Yep. And you'll see that once we get to the next phase.
Exactly. So when I say we're starting from blank, like by default, it still wants you to go through and maybe use some like handy templates and stuff. We're just going to skip this completely and start from.
Can't. Oh, you can.
You can skip,
Yep.
but it pretty much doesn't want you to.
You should have given it an enable, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. We give it a name here because even if you hit skip, it doesn't say that. So we're just going to call this application discovery. All right. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create an endpoint that is basically allowing us to hit this flow app or this Power Automate flow externally from anywhere in the world.
Yep.
Otherwise, there's no way to sort of trigger it to do what it needs to do. So we're just going to type in HTTP. And you can see here straight away that we've got a couple of flags next to all these that say premium. So that's what Steve was talking about, that if you don't have the correct license, you will not be able to use these triggers.
Well, you can in a trial.
You can in a trial, exactly. So there's nothing stopping anyone from signing up to the trial. I believe it's 25 or 30 days.
Yep, 30 days.
Exactly. So that gives you more than enough time to actually play around with this and see if there's any value in your organization. And I can guarantee you there is.
100%.
Exactly.
Even if it's just like, here's a super simple one, which is going in and grabbing attachments off emails and putting it into a OneDrive. Or
exactly.
Automating emails coming in from your service desk and then going and raising a ticket and replying back going, this is the ticket ID.
Exactly. I mean, we use this ourselves and with quite a lot of clients around password reset notifications.
Yep.
The concept of like just business automation and business process automation, there's a lot of value in sort of getting to know this sort of stuff, and it's very easy to use, as you'll see. So the first trigger we're going to do is a request trigger. So again, it's just creating an endpoint for us. Now, this is when I first sort of started doing this, I thought that this was quite complex. So I'll show you how simple it is now. The idea here is that we need to create the schema that is going to be that the endpoint is expecting to get. So essentially, if you send a body of data to this endpoint and it doesn't fit the schema that it's expecting, it fails.
Yes.
This is one way that we can create a slightly more secure endpoint, because even if someone gets access to the trigger URL, if they don't know what the schema is that it's expecting, it's just going to fail and they're not going to be able to do anything with it. So it is really smart, but what's involved is that you need to essentially create sample data that is going to be exactly what you expect to send in a real world scenario. So I've already got one of those. I'm just going to go off screen and grab that. Just give me one tick. Data. Convert. All right, I'm just going to select that. And down here, I'm just going to click on Use Sample Payload to generate schema.
This is pretty awesome, because what it's doing is going and creating that JSON schema for us on the fly off sample reference. So one of the things you need to make sure is if you're going to use a sample data set, it has all of the fields that you're needing in there.
That's correct. So you can obviously change this, but the idea here is that you already know what you want to send to the table, and you've already got it formed. And this is obviously just a JSON array, or an array of JSON objects. So quickly, you can see here I've got a key. This is just a random GUID that we're going to use as our unique ID for those that are used to SQL databases. We've got the host name, which is my computer name, my account that is currently using on the machine, and then just some details from that Win32 product class in WMI, or in this instance, I'm actually using SIM because it's modern and great. And you can see here that I've got a couple of different things. So I've got objects. I've got two basically. So we hit done, and it creates that JSON schema for us. So we can see here that we've got an array is the root type.
And what was that comment that popped up there, Ben?
Oh yeah, it was. Actually, let's do this because this is is it going to pop up? No, it's not. Okay, so the thing that popped up there was make sure that you use application JSON as the content type of your request. This bit me. I'm not going to lie. I've spent about 2 hours having to remember how I set this up the first time. So yes, pay attention to what pops up on the screen. It is going to help you. Don't be like me. Be good. But okay, so we can just see here that we've got an array type. What all that means is that everything underneath that, we can have multiple instances of the same object. Again, here we've got our base object, so the singular thing that we're going to be sending. It has things like key, host name, product, that sort of stuff. The same information that I showed you in the sample payload.
And this is where you can go in there, and if it's come through as a string, you could change it to a date or something like that if you wanted to capture that sort of information.
That's correct. And you can actually allow it to be multiple different kinds, which is really good in case, say, there's a scenario where you have a Boolean value. It's either going to be true, false, or it's not going to exist at all. You need to handle that, which is something that I learned the hard way as well. Finally, we've got the required section here, which is basically just saying that these values need to be populated. Now, if you were collecting data and it wasn't necessarily important to be there, you can remove the name of that key, and you can allow it to be part of the ingestion, but it's not going to fall over if it's missing. That's the key takeaway from that one.
Yep. So and that's where it allows you, like if you look at an ARM template, it doesn't have all of the objects in there because it would be too big. So this is correct. Where we're talking about you can take out those objects, or when you pull back a policy from Intune, you're only going to see the ones that are configured.
That is correct. All right, so you can see at the top here in the HTTP post URL, it says URL will be generated after save. So just make note of that. We don't have an endpoint yet. So we'll continue on with the rest of the flow that we're creating, and we'll come back to that and I'll show you how we actually use it. All right, so we're going to create a new step now. And we're going to create the next step is basically working with the table storage. So we're going to go in here and go Azure Table Storage. And you can see here we've got a bunch of different actions. They are all premium. So again, you need that correct licensing. Otherwise, you will not be able to use this. But at least for trials, you will be able to play with this stuff. So we can see we've got quite a lot of information here. So you could essentially create an end-to-end sort of API, for lack of a better term, to actually work with tables.
Yes.
But for now, what we want to essentially do is just we want to be able to insert, or if we see the same row ID, we want to be able to merge or change that data. So insert or merge entity is the best one for this scenario.
And or replace, because they're roughly doing the same thing. It's just,
correct.
Yeah.
This is slightly less destructive, because if the data is the same, then it's not touched.
Yes.
That's the key takeaway here. So yeah. So we're going to go in and create our table. Now, we were playing around with this, but I need to actually create a new one.
Oh, okay.
So let's just go in and add new connection. All right, so the connection name is going to be Intune Training. Storage account name is Intune Training Table. Oop, there we go. And the shared storage key is here. Let's go into access keys. So this is where, sorry, this is where I'm getting the key to actually authenticate into the table. I'm just going back to our storage account, clicking on access keys, and just copying this. Now, obviously, if, for example, you're streaming this on YouTube, you might want to refresh these keys after you've demoed them, because otherwise people can get access to your data, and that would be bad.
Or we could just sit there and see how many people put stuff into our tables.
We could. Let's leave the viewers to decide what ends up happening.
It's a multiple choice adventure.
Exactly. So we're just putting this information in so that we can connect into our table. I'm going to hit create, and then we're going to select that new connection. So it should come up.
You want to hit cancel on that? Not now for us.
Oh yeah, definitely. There we go. I think it's already selected that one. Yeah, Intune training example. Yep. So again, I've got two because we were using one before, but this is the one we want to use. So the table that's required is Intune training app data. So again, if we go back to our table, just confirming that this all looks good, we've got our table, Intune training app data. So it's already connected in, and it can see all the different tables that we have in our storage account. Partition key is an interesting one. This is something that I learnt when I sort of moved away from sort of SQL into this more sort of fluid NoSQL style of data storage. You can have multiple different sort of blocks of data in an Azure table, and they are all linked with a partition key. So I can have, like beta or production or whatever,
v1.0,
v1.0, things like that. So you can have nested data that neither of these tables have anything to do with each other, but they're stored in the same table, which is kind of cool. So for this example, we're just going to call it partition 1. The row key is our unique ID, and again, as I said, we're just going to use the key because this is a unique GUID that is created for every single entry in our script. And finally, we're going to go into the entity, and the entity basically means what data is going to exist in this entry into our table.
Yep.
And for this scenario, we want to say current item. Okay, so what current item means is it's iterating through all of the array, and it's just importing the current item. So it's kind of like a for loop, for those that understand that better. That's it. This is the Power Automate flow run that we're going to be using. So I'm just going to go ahead and click save. And now if we go back to the HTTP request, we will see a URL that's been generated for us. So this is the endpoint that we need to actually hit to run our code. So I'm going to show you sort of what the code looks like that we're using for this example. It's not super helpful, but the idea is there, and it should help you sort of scaffold out and come up with new ideas for this. In a real world, what you would do is any data that you wanted to store, you would put it in a PowerShell script, and then you would deploy it out through Intune, or whatever method you really wanted. So we'll just pop over to my super handy dandy code shell, and I'm just going to paste this here. All right, so that's our URL. So let's just quickly step through everything that I've got here. So this is the code that I would run on our target machines. So we build this up as a PowerShell script or a Win32 application, and we push it out to our clients. It's the first thing it's going to do is it's going to go into this WIM instance, or SIM instance in this case, and it's going to get the object Win32 product, which hopefully everyone knows is where we can get all the information about applications that are installed on a machine.
Yep.
From there, we're going to step through. So just to make things faster, I only got the first couple of things here. So actually the first 3 products that are installed on my machine. And we're just storing this data as a PS custom object in a variable. So what we're getting here is we're getting the key, which, as I've explained, is a unique GUID that will be generated every single time this is hit. The host name, which is the computer that I'm running it on. The user is my UPN, or my account email address.
User principal name.
User principal name, that's correct. And then we're just pulling some data from that SIM instance. So we're getting the name, that should be vendor. the product ID, and the product version. So fairly small stuff, but you can see that you can scale this out as big or as complex as you want. The key thing you need to understand is that just make sure that whatever you do here, you need to update that schema. So if you add another value, you need to update the schema, otherwise this will not work.
Definitely.
Cool. So once you've got that, all the information that you want stored in your variable, we're then going to go down and we're going to create the HTTP request or the REST call to that flow URL or URI in this case. First thing, very, very important. This is what's, I've had a very busy day, and this is what sort of got me. You need to define and make sure that when you send that request, that you're telling the endpoint that you are sending application JSON data.
Yes.
Otherwise, it doesn't know what to do with it, and it just falls over.
And it just breaks out.
Exactly. So this is just a hash file. Or a key value pair that just is content type is application/JSON. The URI, as we've explained, was generated from the Power Automate Flow app when we created that trigger and saved it. And then finally, we've got our REST method, which is a post method because we're sending data to an environment.
Yep.
The body is that data just converted to JSON, and I've compressed it down so that it's a smaller file to send. The URI is this variable, and the header is the header variable, which is the content type. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop back over to our Power Automate, and I'm going to test to make sure this works. And in theory, there's nothing that could possibly go wrong. Exactly, it's fun, right? Let's just make sure that's all saved. It's just taking a little while to save, of course, because it's a live demo. Okay, so that's saved. So we're going to click test. And so there's two options here. One's obviously grayed out. This is because this has never been done before. So we're going to perform the trigger action ourselves. So we're going to save and test this. And then on another screen, because I'm running this on my machine, and we don't really need to see how this runs, but I've got that data already saved in a variable. I've got the header, URI, and all that fun information. I do need to grab this because things have changed.
Yep.
All right, and you can see on the screen there that it's just sitting there spinning, waiting for me, or waiting for input on this endpoint.
Waiting for the trigger.
That's correct. So, all right, URI is that, and I'm going to invoke that REST method now. And we should see any minute now. Flow ran successfully.
Through.
Happy days. So we can step into this data now and we can see everything that came through. So the first thing, obviously, the point of this is to step through like you were looking at the code from beginning to end. So we're going to look at the HTTP request. That's the schema. This is the body of the information. So we can see, we were looking for a key. We have a key, hostname, user, that sort of stuff. We can see that we have multiple entries as we expected. So that's fantastic. The output is exactly formed how we wanted it to.
Yep.
We then step into the apply to each, or that for loop that I was talking about, and we can see that we have one of 3 entries. So in our insert or merge entity, we can open that up and have a look at each one. So I can see here that I've got my table, my partition key, the row key, which has been pulled from that key value, which is great. And then we've got the output data just to show that it was successful. So 204 is a successful return in this scenario. So obviously we can step through and look at all the information that we've got.
And if there is a failure, obviously there will be the next fail.
Exactly.
Give you the ability to go, oh, it failed on this, why did it fail? And then dig into the wheres and the whys. You've got an L value or something like that. That's right.
So cool. The flow worked. Power Automate was nice and easy to set up. The point here is that okay, so we've imported that data. So where is it and how does it look? So in this scenario, the idea here is that it's kind of a programmatic table that you wouldn't necessarily go in and look at yourself. You would use this in, say, a Power BI report to show to your manager or something like that. But the data is available. You can look at it. So if we go back to our storage account and we go into Storage Explorer, this is the sort of the web concept of the downloadable Storage Explorer.
Which is good.
It is good. The problem is that for some reason it doesn't.
It's not fast.
No, it's not. It's not the fastest. I'm just going to refresh this because the UI sometimes freezes. So let's just go here. There we go. All right, so we're going to go to our table. We can see our Intune training app data, and we should see 3 entries in partition 1, which we can. So these aren't ordered in any particular fashion, but that, again, it doesn't matter. The point here is that the data has been imported, and then we can do stuff with this now. So this is non-standard data that wasn't available to you prior to this, and with a few clicks, we've created a very powerful automation solution for you to get that data.
If anything, it's actually easier than what we would traditionally need to do with Config Manager. And MOF files and WMI and all of that. Exactly.
Because, again, the key goal here is that you create that schema, and that's your the complex MOF file, for lack of a better term there. If you know the schema of the data you're sending, that's half the battle. And as you've seen, Power Automate makes that very, very easy.
Yeah, it does. Cool. All right, that's been a great demo, Ben.
Thank you.
I think it's been fantastic, and I think everybody else will be very excited by this one. So do you have any parting words for us, or are you happy to wrap it up?
I guess my parting words are, if you haven't used Power Automate, if this is the first time you've seen it, I'd strongly recommend going in, getting yourself a trial account, and just having a play, seeing the things that you can do. Steve was sort of mentioning, there's a lot of value in looking at ways that you can automate email actions. That's amazing. If that's something that you want to do as well, you can send emails on behalf of people and do all sorts of cool stuff like that.
You can even have it automatically send Teams messages and things like that. So you don't need to then think about it. So one of the things we're looking at is getting data from Intune via an Azure function, and then pushing it out via a Teams message so people can go, oh, I need to do stuff.
That's correct, yeah. And as far as pricing of Power Automate runs go, it's near free.
Yes.
Basically, once you have the correct licensing for it, I believe it's very much like Function Apps, where you get about 50,000 runs per month for free.
Something like that, yeah.
It's comically cheap. So I really just can't stress enough that there's no reason to not get into this.
Exactly.
If you sit there on a day-to-day basis and go, I seem to be doing this a fair bit, you can probably automate that out of your daily process using Power Automate.
Yep. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for dropping by, Ben. This has been a great session.
Yeah.
And where can the kids find you on the socials?
On Twitter, it is powers_hell. I have a blog that I'm actively trying to update more than never, which is just powers-hell.com. And yeah, they're my 2 sort of main sources of communication.
Awesome. And you can find me at On-Prem Cloud Guy, and as always, Adam's at AdamGrossTX. So I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks.